Tag TV brings you daily news bulletin from India. Breaking news and views from India.
Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Lepakshi Khurana. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you on Tuesday, the 19th of March. Traders in Indian capital burn Chinese goods over stance on Masood Azhar. Pashtun activists slam existence of terror camps in Pakistan. And Afghans will not accept Islamic Emirate system, claim political parties. And now for all the details. A trade body in Indian capital New Delhi on Tuesday banned Chinese products to express their anger over China's move last week to block India's bid to put Masood Azhar, a Pakistani militant leader, on a UN terrorist list. Masood Azhar's Jaish-e-Mohammed terror group had claimed responsibility for the suicide bombing in India's Jammu and Kashmir that killed at least 40 paramilitary police personnel on February 14th.
A trade body in Indian capital New Delhi on Tuesday burned Chinese products to express their anger over Chinese move last week to block India's bid to put Masood Azhar, a Pakistani militant leader, on a UN terrorist list. Pakistan's long-standing ally China has repeatedly thwarted efforts to implement UN sanctions against Masood Azhar, the founder of Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed terror group, which claimed the deadly attack on security forces on February 14th in India's Jammu and Kashmir. The traders called for the boycott of Chinese goods and wage an economic war ahead of Holi, the festival of colours, which will be celebrated later this week. They burnt Chinese goods in a traditional bonfire as a part of Holi, which symbolises the burning of an evil demon in Hindu mythology.
देखिए जिस तरीके से चाइना ने मसूद अजहर के मामले में चौथी बार संयुक्त राष्ट्र में वीटो किया और लगातार पाकिस्तान की मदद कर रहा है, जिसके जरिए से पाकिस्तान भारत में आतंकी गतिविधियों को पनाह दे रहा है, उसके खिलाफ देश भर के व्यापारियों ने आज दिल्ली के सदर बाजार से लेकर के देश के 1500 जगहों पर इस प्रकार का चाइना की वस्तुओं का प्रदर्शन किया है.
This was the fourth such block on Masood Azhar by China, India's second biggest trade partner, that said it needed more time to decide. At least 40 paramilitary personnel were killed in the suicide bombing claimed by Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed in Pulwama district of India's Jammu and Kashmir. India's foreign ministry has vowed to pursue all available avenues to ensure that terrorist leaders who are involved in heinous attacks are brought to justice.
In news from Pakistan, the Supreme Court of Pakistan on Tuesday issued a notice to the National Accountability Bureau on a petition filed by former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif challenging the Islamabad High Court's verdict dismissing his bail application in the Al Azizia corruption reference. The High Court had on February 25th dismissed Sharif's petition seeking bail and suspension of a sentence on medical grounds.
Pakistan's Supreme Court on Tuesday issued notices to the National Accountability Bureau as it heard a petition filed by former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif against a verdict by the Islamabad High Court dismissing his bail application in the Al Azizia corruption reference. The Islamabad High Court had on February 25th dismissed Sharif's petition seeking bail and suspension of his sentence in the corruption case on medical grounds. The High Court had stated that it is not a case pertaining to unusual circumstances and bail cannot be granted in light of the Supreme Court's previous decisions. Sharif was sentenced to 7 years in prison by an accountability court in Al Azizia reference in a verdict announced on December 24th last year. The Supreme Court on Tuesday said Sharif's medical reports are being reviewed. The apex court later summoned a response from the anti-corruption watchdog within a week and adjourned the hearing of the petition till March 26th.
Moving on, Pashtun activists recently held a demonstration in Geneva against the terror camps operating in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and federally administered tribal areas. They also raised the issue of ethnic stereotyping, abductions and targeting of Pashtuns in military operations by Pakistani security forces.
Members of the Pashtun community recently held a demonstration in Geneva against the terror camps operating in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and federally administered tribal areas. During the demonstration organized on the sidelines of UNHRC session, Pashtun activists alleged terror camps in the region are being used to train terrorists for deployment in Afghanistan and demanded that they be dismantled. They also accused Pakistani security forces of widespread human rights violations, including targeted killings of Pashtun political activists in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan.
There are terrorist groups which are working, you see, from Pakistan occupied areas and Pashtun areas, which they are sending and using in Afghanistan. But at the same time, they can create these people and send for fighting in Kashmir also. So the thing is that dismantling is no question. They should be dismantled.
We want a Truth and Reconciliation Commission so that we know that the hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed during the last 17 years in this so-called war on terror, where innocent people have been killed by Pakistani military, and the about 32,000 enforced disappearances. We want to know about how these people have disappeared, how these people were killed.
Pashtuns have long blamed that they have been targets of military operations, internal displacement, ethnic stereotyping and abductions by the Pakistani security forces. They accuse that Pakistan Army functions along with militant groups in the region and indiscriminately uses force against innocent Pashtuns.
Meanwhile, Pakistani Christians also held a protest rally in Geneva to raise their voice against Islamic hardliners who are persecuting minorities in Pakistan in the name of blasphemy. Rights groups say the blasphemy law is exploited by religious extremists as well as ordinary Pakistanis to settle personal scores against minorities in Pakistan.
Pakistani Christians living in parts of Europe recently held a protest rally in Geneva to raise their voice against Islamic hardliners who are persecuting minorities in Pakistan in the name of blasphemy. The protesters, including women and children, carried out a rally on the sidelines of the 48th sessions of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. They demanded that the Pakistan government must abolish the draconian blasphemy law misused by the state and non-state actors to target the minorities.
हर लोग हर एक बंदा 295C से परेशान है क्योंकि वो ऐसी एक लटकती तलवार है जो हर वक्त हमारे क्रिश्चियंस के ऊपर रहती है, जिसका डर होता है अगर किसी के साथ हम कोई लड़ाई वगैरह झगड़ा हो तो वो हम पर 295C केस बना के डाल देते हैं ताकि हम फंस जाएं। तो ये एक्चुअली ये जो है बहुत गलत कानून है, हम चाहते हैं कि इसको ख़त्म किया जाए।
Well, Pakistan systematically discriminates against minorities. Christians are particularly targeted by the blasphemy law that's put in place since 1984. And Christian persecution is a real threat to democracy. It's a real threat to human rights. It's something that the world community needs to take a look at. What's happening in Pakistan is appalling.
Christians in Pakistan allege they have been facing systematic persecutions as not only their churches are being targeted but also girls belonging to the community are kidnapped and forcibly converted into Islam. Christians make up less than 2% of the population in Pakistan. Right groups say that the blasphemy law is exploited by religious extremists as well as ordinary Pakistanis to settle personal scores against minorities.
In news from Afghanistan, political parties in Afghanistan have raised objection against change in the system of governance, which defies their country's constitution, saying Afghans will not accept the Islamic Emirate system. The remarks by the parties came as the fifth round of talks between the US and Taliban negotiators in Doha ended last week with agreement in draft on some key issues.
Representatives of Afghanistan's mainstream political parties on Monday said protection of the republic system should be a red line in the peace talks with the Taliban. They said they will never endorse any change in the system of governance which defies their country's constitution. An Afghan political delegation and the Taliban had held talks in Moscow in February. Another delegation of political elites is again expected to hold a second round of talks on Afghan peace in Doha, local media reported.
حزب اسلامی بر صلح و آمدن صلح تاکید میکنه، بر نظام جمهوری اسلامی تاکید میکنه و بر انتخابات تاکید خواهد کرد.
در چارچوب یک توافق کنار میرن که به خود نظام افغانستان صدمه نزنه.
The remarks by the political parties comes as the fifth round of talks between the US and Taliban negotiators in Doha ended after 16 days last week, with agreement in draft on two key issues under debate: the withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan and counter-terrorism assurances.
Around 21 visually impaired couples got married in a mass wedding ceremony held in India's western Vadodara city on Monday. Mass weddings are becoming popular, especially among the economically backward sections of the Indian society, as these reduce the worries of financial implications among the parents or guardians of the bride.
Around 21 visually impaired couples tied the nuptial knot at the mass wedding in India's western Vadodara city on Monday. The happiness of couples who came from India's western Maharashtra province knew no bounds as they got married according to Hindu rituals organized by a charitable trust at a temple in the city. The brides and the grooms were seen performing all Hindu wedding rituals while dressed up in traditional attires for their big day.
वहाँ आज पहली बार एक अनोखा मानवता का कार्य हो रहा है कि आज 21 प्रज्ञा चक्षु युगल के शुभ लग्न यहाँ संपन्न हो रहे हैं।
बहुत बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, शादी हो रही है। क्यों हम हमारे जैसे तुम लोगों का तुम इतना कर रहे हैं, इसलिए बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है।
Mass weddings are becoming very popular, especially among the economically backward sections of the Indian society, as these reduce the worries of financial implications among the parents or guardians of the brides. Conventionally, the family of a bride in India is expected to bear the expenses of a lavish wedding and also give dowry to the bridegroom deemed as gifts to the bride, which could be in cash or kind.
Hundreds of Hindu devotees on Monday smeared each other with ashes of cremated dead people in India's spiritual capital Varanasi to celebrate the beginning of Holi, the festival of colours. Every year, scores of people gather at the banks of River Ganges in Varanasi, upholding the centuries-old tradition.
Devout Hindus on Monday celebrated Holi, the Indian festival of colours, by smearing each other with ashes of cremated dead people in India's spiritual capital of Varanasi, upholding a centuries-old tradition. Scores of people gathered at the banks of River Ganges and greeted each other with ashes and danced to the tunes of devotional songs. According to a legend, Hindu god of destruction Shiva had come to take his wife Parvati home after a couple of days of marriage on the occasion of Rangbhari Ekadashi. But his dear gang of ghosts, goblins and ghouls are not allowed to come where humans are residing, missing the celebrations. So Shiva comes back to celebrate with the ghosts every year on this occasion, giving birth to the tradition.
बाबा विश्वनाथ रंगभरी एकादशी के दूसरे दिन मणगंगा घाट आते हैं और यहाँ चिताभस्म से होली खेलते हैं। 10-50 इस पूरे धरती की होली प्रारंभ मानी जाती है।
पूरे भारत में ये इसी जगह मनाया जाता है जो मसान के राख से होली खेला जाता है।
Meanwhile, in India's northern Prayagraj city, Holi brought joy to some children suffering from cerebral palsy who played with colours and danced to their heart's content. The festival brings together people from all classes and age groups as they play with colours, distribute sweets and take out processions. The Festival of Colours falls on March 21st this year.
Well, that's all we have for you from South Asia this evening. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/SAsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @SAsiaNewsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Good night.